Morning, Dr. Welcher.
Good morning. We haven't been formally introduced. Your whole name?
Robert Alessi, sir.
Robert Lessie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Dr. Welcher, the area in which you engage can also include, and I believe you used the term on direct, forensics, correct? Do you engage in any forensic activity in your profession?
Yes, the general umbrella of you basically coming in and giving scientific evidence in court applies to forensics. So my main job is accident reconstruction and biomechanics, and so that's what I do. Sometimes it doesn't involve court. When it goes to court, that's generally forensics.
Right. So you're here today, that is my question, you're here today at least in part with regard to forensics, correct? Because forensics is the Latin term for it is basically you're going to have some type of court or jury presentation. It's for the law, correct? Would you agree with that? It's for law, forensics?
I mean, exactly the way you asked that, no. It's for engineering and it's for biomechanics. It's in the court of law, I think is what you're asking?
That's exactly it.
Okay, yes, certainly for the court of law, yes.
It ends up to a court of law, and in forensics is a common term.
Yes, sir.
So it relates to, or it's used in, or it's suitable for a court of law, the analysis. You'd agree with that? It's a general principle?
Yes.
Not a trick question. Okay. And so in forensics, what you're doing, among other things, is you're applying the scientific method and principles in here in a criminal matter, correct?
Yeah, you try and apply as much as possible.
Right. And so the primary goal of forensic science is to uncover the truth and to provide objective evidence that can be presented in court.
That is generally correct. Again, there are elements, for example, this analysis that are relying sort of on subjective evidence, like the testimonial, the witness statements. So it's not solely based, but ideally you'd want it as much as possible based on objective data.
So you would agree that truth and objective evidence is part of the presentation in terms of information for forensics in a court of law?
Certainly objective information. Truth sometimes, again, can be subjective.
Oh, so you don't believe truth? You believe sometimes truth applies and sometimes it doesn't?
If you know for a fact it is true, but if you take someone's deposition testimony, you have to look at it relative to the evidence, and it's either consistent with the evidence or not.
You don't have a dog in the fight. Is that what you said, sir?
I did.
And that you, quote, don't care, end quote, about the outcome. That's what you made a point of saying in the beginning,
That
correct?
is 100% correct.
Now you simply follow the data. Is that correct?
I try to do that.
You try to do that.
I'm not perfect. So
Okay.
I do my best. I believe I've done it here.
Okay. Part of the use of scientific method, the purpose is to avoid what is called bias in the scientific method, right? In terms of the application of methodologies and principles. You would agree that's a pretty fundamental purpose of the scientific method is to avoid biases?
The purpose of the scientific method is to get the most logical and correct answer without bias.
Exactly, exactly. To do it with, apply the scientific method without bias being part of the application of the method, correct?
That's hopefully what you can do.
We're going to have several topics, sir, and what I'm going to try to do to make it a little clearer is I'm going to say when I'm switching topics.
Oh, good.
So what I'd like to do now is switch topics.
Okay.
You're aware that the Massachusetts State Police has troopers who specialize in accident reconstruction, correct?
Yes.
And there are troopers within the Massachusetts State Police Collision Analysis and Reconstruction Section whose sole responsibility is to engage in accident reconstruction. Do you know that?
I do not know that.
Do you know that there are troopers within the Massachusetts State Police Collision Analysis and Reconstruction Section who engage in accident reconstruction?
Just based on what I've seen in this case.
Right. Based upon what you've seen in the case, that's a fair statement.
And I just know that those people are doing it.
Are you familiar with a Massachusetts state trooper named Joseph Paul, P-A-U-L?
Yes.
And you
Well,
know...
I'm familiar with his reports. I don't know the man.
Okay. Familiar with Trooper Paul through his reports in this case, correct?
Correct.
And are you aware that he was assigned by lead investigator, former Trooper Michael Proctor, to be a constructionist in this case on January 29th of 2022, as evidenced by that report or those reports of Trooper Paul? Do you know that?
Well, you put a lot of things in there. I know he issued a reconstruction report. I don't know who told him to do it. So the first part of your question, I don't know, but I did see a reconstruction report from him.
On November 5th of 2024, your firm Aperture was paid $44,500 by the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office to conduct work that was at least similar to the work of Trooper Paul, correct?
I have no idea. I don't get the billing or the statements.
You are a senior vice president of Aperture, are you not?
I am?
You would know, wouldn't you, if your firm was not getting paid for work since September 23rd of 2024, wouldn't you?
No, probably not. Usually it takes, 9, 10, 12 months of not getting paid before the accounting department reaches out to me.
Are you aware that on April 5th, 2025, the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office amended your contract? Are you aware of that, sir?
I am.
And isn't it the case that that amendment authorized the amount of $325,000 to be paid to Aperture? Isn't that what that amendment contract states?
I believe that's correct.
If I showed you the contract,
Sure.
may I put you on it?
Yes.
May I put you on it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can
Sir,
you-
may I
Can, yeah, could you direct me so we're not wasting time?
Why don't you just take a look at that, Dr. Burgess?
Thank you.
Well, we got started on this conversation with regard to a statement you made earlier in your direct that you didn't have any dog in the hunt. You recall that statement in the beginning of your direct testimony.
You misquoted me. I don't have any dog in the fight.
You don't have any dog in the fight.
Correct.
Thank you. Now, switching topics.
Okay.
We'll get to the changes later, but the updated presentation you created just how many days ago?
I'm going to say weeks ago.
Weeks? 2 weeks?
I don't actually know without looking at the documents.
Assume the trial started approximately April 22nd of 2024.
Okay.
Did you create your updated presentation before or after April 22nd of 2024?
I don't know.
Do you know when?
Hold on one second. Dr. Welcher, I'd ask that you not do
Not look at,
anything.
okay, I was going to try and answer his question. My apologies. I will shut it down.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Welcher, what I'm going to ask you to do is get whatever information you need for Mr. Alessi's last question. Mr. Alessi, I need you over there. So,
Yep.
and once you get that answer, I'm going to ask you to shut your computer down, or at least put down the cover.
How about it?
Thank you. All right, so you can answer Mr. Alessi's question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Could you give me the question again, please?
Yes. When did you create the updated presentation that you reviewed in your direct testimony?
So that addition I made was taken out. It wasn't in my direct
Sir,
testimony.
If you can just hear my question, it's this. The version of the presentation that you put on the screen, when did you create that version? I'm just looking for a date.
So to answer your question about the version on the screen, I created that yesterday when the judge asked me to take off some of the headers. So yesterday.
Okay, good. Now, the version before that you created yesterday, when did you create that version?
The day before.
And then the version before that one, when did you create that?
I mean, I save it every day.
Understood.
So every day.
So you've changed the presentation every day since when?
No, I don't think I've changed the presentation every day.
That's my question. My question is, how many times have you changed it within the last 2 weeks, your presentation?
Let me try and cut to the chase here.
Sure.
That slide was added on May 13th, and then it was taken out before I presented it here. So it was not in my presentation here.
Right. So thank you for that answer. So
You're
here's
welcome.
the question. Your first version, as I understand it, of the slide presentation was January 30th, 2025. Is that correct?
Correct.
When was the next time after January 30th, 2025 that you changed that presentation?
May 13th.
Assuming the trial started April 22nd of 2025, you changed your PowerPoint presentation during this trial, correct?
Correct.
And how many times did you change your presentation after April 22nd of 2025?
Well, the last time I changed it was like 10 minutes ago. So in response to various discussions, I've been making continuous changes to it.
I want to make sure you finish your answer so I didn't interrupt.
No,
you.
I'm not sure how much granularity you want to that answer.
Right. So how many times had you changed your presentation from January 30th, 2025 until when you first walked in the courthouse yesterday?
Do you mind if I count?
Not at all.
So there was the May 13th change. Half of that was in response to objections from the defense. I had to add all the paths to where everything was. Then when I got out here, Mr. Brennan asked me to take out references to evidence about statements that I was not allowed to present. So that would have been within the last 3 days. And then I've modified it a couple times today based on rulings from the judge.
Can you then, for yourself, recall any instance where you submitted an amended report in the middle of a trial?
Amended reports? No. Amended analysis? Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Leslie, is this a good time for a break or
It-
5 more minutes?
It's a good time, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, folks, why don't we take 5 more minutes?
In terms of the amendments, are you aware that the defense counsel received your amended PowerPoint presentation at 3 p.m. on Memorial Day? Are you aware of that?
No.
Are you aware of any activity in this trial of any kind before you testified yesterday?
Again, as I mentioned, I've been getting random emails, and then I've been seeing it pop up on my news feeds as well. But once I was aware of the reclusion, I made sure to not review any of that. But as recently as last night, I got an email that said biomechanical engineering job, or like applying for a job, and I opened it up and it was some internet troll.
Oh, you're an internet troll.
What's an internet troll?
I've heard of these. They emerged from Usenet after the Great Flame War of '99. They feed off of negative reactions.
We don't want any trouble, good sir. We're just on our way to...
Get an abortion. Abortion should be for free at Walmart.
Well, that's an extreme stance on what's a very nuanced issue.
All teenage girls should be required to get abortions.
Aaron, be Careful.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. How could society ever endorse something like that?
Gay people celebrate 9/11 like it's their f***ing birthday. 9/11 is like Christmas for gay people.
You shut up! You were ignorant! You don't know anything about my stuff!
Oh my God, man! Oh, we have to get out of here.
No, we can do this, okay? He's just baiting us.
What?
He wants us to snap. He's feeding off of our anger, all right? I got this.
Okay.
Hi.
All Jews deserve to die in the Holocaust.
I know you're just saying that to get me mad. I know you don't mean it.
I'm just kidding. Everyone knows the Holocaust. Set it off.
Good one. Me and my friend were just wondering if...
Steve Jobs owns a PC.
What the f*** did you say? I will f***ing kill you, you piece of shit.
Where you going? There's no kitchen that way.
Sure. I'm asking about emails from the prosecution.
Oh, no, there's been no emails about what's been going. I mean, there's been scheduling, when am I going to come, things like that.
How then was it determined that you were going to be able to amend your power presentation if you weren't communicating with the prosecution?
I mean, they asked me about the witness statement of 138 right around May 13th.
How did they ask you about that, sir?
I don't recall if it was a Zoom meeting, a phone call.
The Techstream data indicates the number of seconds into the key cycle that a particular event occurs.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
In order to properly determine the location and the timing of a Techstream event, it's important that you correctly identify the trip that is associated with a particular key cycle, correct?
I think I'm going to say yes, that Techstream tells you the trip.
I'm just asking if it's important that you correctly identify the trip associated with a particular key cycle. And do so by determining, in order to properly determine the location and timing of a Techstream event.
So the Techstream tells you the trigger event and it tells you the key cycle. So I'm not determining that, I'm reading that from the Techstream data.
Okay. So in order to properly read, to use your verb, the location and timing of a Techstream event, it's important that you correctly identify the trip that is associated with a particular key cycle. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement.
If you associate the wrong trip with the wrong key cycle, then your estimate of when the Techstream event occurred will be wrong, correct?
It can. I mean, you need to take the totality of the evidence in the Techstream with the mileage, the overall timing into account.
So are you saying, sir, that if you have the wrong trip with the wrong key cycle, you can get the correct Techstream event?
No, not necessarily. Again, you have to take the totality of the data.
My question is with regard to if you have the wrong trip with the wrong key cycle, then your estimate of when the Techstream event occurred will also be wrong. Isn't that just a matter of logic, sir?
So, again, the Techstream event tells you the trip and it tells you the time. If you're saying I'm, say, associating that with the wrong infotainment information or vice versa, then that would be wrong. But the Techstream data tells you how much time is associated with each trip. There's no difference there.
If you associate the wrong trip with the wrong key cycle, then your estimate of where the Techstream event occurred will be wrong. Is that correct?
You can't associate the wrong event with the wrong key cycle because it keys in the key cycle with the event.
Let me try it a different way. Your analysis, or anyone's analysis, and conclusions regarding the timing and the location of the Techstream data are only as good as your ability to correctly associate a key cycle with a particular event. Is that an accurate statement?
No. Again, you need to take the totality of the data. So that is one element. You need to look, for example, at the mileage. You need to look at the timing of the events. So this is considered a tool in the analysis process. You need to look at the totality of data to see how it matches up with the physical evidence.
So are you saying that you can have an incorrect key cycle with a particular trip, but you can still get accurate timing and location of Techstream data?
So again, you don't get incorrect key cycle with the trip. The trip and the key cycle are coded in by the Techstream. If you are attributing an event to the wrong trip, which has a fixed key cycle, that could be a problem.
Exactly. And you've reviewed, by the way, Trooper Paul's reports, correct?
I have.
There were two reports of Trooper Paul. There was his original CARS report and then a supplemental report that were listed in the documents you reviewed. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that, but I'll take your word for it.
I don't want you to have to take my word. Do you recall, sir,
No, I
that there
don't.
were do you recall that there was a report of Trooper Paul?
Yes,
Okay, and you read that report, I assume, sir?
I did.
And it would be important for you to read that report and read it carefully because it addressed the subject matter that you were addressing, correct?
No, I did my own independent analysis. As a matter of fact, it'd probably be more important that I don't do that to avoid confirmational bias.
But you did read Trooper Paul's report,
Of
correct?
course.
So, you therefore are aware that the Commonwealth has maintained up into your engagement.
Yeah, I'm going to see a sidebar on this.
Do you have knowledge whether there is one time or more than one time for the Commonwealth's position, as you know it from reading documents that you said you've reviewed, that there are different times alleged for the incident to have occurred at 34 Fairview?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask the question, remove part of it.
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
You have to remove part of that sentence.
Okay, understood, Your Honor. Do you know whether there is more than one time that has been proposed by the Commonwealth for the impact alleged to have occurred at 34 Fairview?
Objection.
Sustained.
I'm going to ask for an instruction.
I'm not giving the instruction now.
Dr. Welcher, in terms of the analyses that you have reviewed in this case, is there one time that you understand there to be for a hypothesis for the time of the impact at 34 Fairview?
Objection.
I'm going to see you again, folks. I'm sorry about this.
Do you know what a force calculation is, sir, when I refer to that term?
I believe so.
What do you believe it to be?
Well, force is usually a physical measurement, but you can also use Newton's second law, which is force equals mass times acceleration.
That's exactly what I wanted to get to. Newton's second law is, and sometimes referred to as the second law of motion. And in the second law is force equals mass times acceleration, correct?
Correct.
And just sort of like simple algebra, sometimes you have one or more of those, but I'm focusing on when you're trying to determine, sir, you're pulling something out.
Calculator. I thought you were going to ask me numbers, do calculations.
All right. We need to do, if we're going to do that, we need to do it with the court's permission.
Sorry.
So if you feel you need to do that, just let me
You
know.
can just leave it right
All
there.
right.
So I just want to get the principles down first. So Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration, and force is oftentimes what you're trying to calculate in a force calculation, correct?
Calculate or measure, yes.
Yeah. And Newton's first law is the law of generally inertia. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. Object in motion tends to stay in motion. We're not talking about that in force. We're talking about Newton's just second law, correct?
You asked me two questions. Newton's first law is generally, as you said, it could be at rest or at constant velocity, but yes.
Okay. Newton's second law is generally just a mathematical calculation, correct?
Yes.
Newton's second law doesn't look at manner, does it? It just looks at force equals mass times acceleration. Newton's second law doesn't look at the surface, does it?
So it's a function of the surface. The A value is a function of the surface you hit.
So you're saying acceleration depends upon the surface?
Yes, of course.
Okay, all right.
For an impact, it does.
Isn't it true that this study states that head injuries are the most common injury type for motor vehicle collisions, constituting more than 61% of all injuries sustained from motor vehicle collisions?
Or could the witness see the document that's being referred to?
Do you have your report in front of you?
I have my report, but reference 25 is not in the section he's referring to.
Dr. Welcher, on your direct testimony, did you not discuss the percentage of pedestrian injuries and relate it to heads? Did you not, on your direct, talk about percentages of injuries that are head injuries in impacts of pedestrians with cars?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you came up with a number. What I'm trying to do is to compare that number to the number in the study that you cite. If you don't remember, that's okay. We'll just move to the next question.
Can I go to my slide?
Whatever you can use to determine what was the percentage that's in the study that you cite in footnote 25 of your report.
Sure. That was also from my presentation that I gave. It's 61.5 for all injuries, 12.7 for fatal injuries.
Thank you.
You're
So I'll
welcome.
repeat my question, and then we'll get it in logic. So that study states that head injuries are the most common injury type from motor vehicle collisions, constituting slightly more than 61% of all injuries sustained from motor vehicle collisions, correct?
That number is correct. You're quoting a sentence. I would want to pull the paper up, but the number is correct.
Okay, so doesn't this article also state that of all head injuries sustained by motor vehicle collisions, only 12.7 of them are fatal?
That does, yes.
Did you mention that only 12.7 are fatal on your direct examination?
It's circled with a red box on my slide.
Did you mention that on your testimony on
I
direct?
thought I did.
This article was published back in 1976 years old. Therefore, if I did the math correct, right?
That sounds correct.
Are you aware that given advancements in science since 1979, advancements in medicine, advancements in technology, the currently understood most common injuries as a result of pedestrian motor vehicle collisions are injuries to the lower extremities?
I'd have to see the study. It wouldn't surprise me. Car technology, especially, for example, with pedestrian safety systems, has caused autonomous braking. So you're getting fewer higher severity crashes, which results in a higher propensity for lower extremity injuries. It's the higher extremity crash that causes the head to either slap into the hood or the window and or bounce off, to where if you get the lower severity crashes, you can still maintain a standing posture. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's accurate.
So you would agree that as of January 2022, the most common injury as a result of a pedestrian motor vehicle collision is one to lower extremities?
No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that date. And again, you have to look at frontals versus rears.
So you contest that the most commonly understood injury as a result of a pedestrian motor vehicle collision is injuries to lower extremities.
Maybe that's about a source.
I'll allow the question.
So I'd want to see the data. Again, most cars, for example, this Lexus, has a pre-collision system in it that will start to apply the brakes if it senses a pedestrian at the front of the car. And so for frontal collisions, it's transitioning, taking what were head injuries, because they're more severe, higher speed crashes, making them lower speed crashes and shifting the injuries to the lower extremities. Just like airbags shifted the head injuries away from the severe ones, and we started getting more or higher ankle and lower leg injuries. So the change in the technology, but for backing, that may not be the case because you have different geometry on the vehicles and you have different safety systems.
I'll try it a different way. Do you have knowledge, as you sit here today, whether the most common injury from a motor vehicle accident is to the lower extremities?
I'd have to look at the literature. I have the article I gave you.
So the answer is you don't know the answer to that question. Is that correct, sir?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
All right. And you know that there is a berm raised above street level, correct? If you did the scan.
Correct.
Do you know the height of that berm?
I believe it's 4 inches.
Nowhere in your report, when you're comparing the height of Mr. O'Keefe to the spoiler, do you account for that 4 inches of the berm, do you?
So yes and no. As I indicated, we don't know exactly where the point of impact is, whether he was completely in the road or up on the berm. But for example, where the tire spins on the Lexus, that could be where she's driving up on the curb. And so then that tire will be at the height of the curb. So if he's standing on the higher part and the right rear tire of the Lexus goes up there and spins, then that would be at the same height. We don't know the exact point of impact. So I don't know whether he was on the road or in the street. I'm trying to make it clear. We don't know his exact body position at the point of impact, nor do we know the exact position on the ground. So, which is part of the reason why I haven't tried to exactly simulate this, because we don't have enough parameters to do that. So I don't have that information. I'm showing the geometry relative to someone of Mr. O'Keefe's height.
So you don't have the information to do that properly, so therefore you can't conclude that he had a laceration to the eye from the spoiler by your own answer that you just gave, correct?
So it was done properly. We don't have absolute information to say where exactly he was. I'm pointing out that the physical evidence, the height, matches the height of the laceration. That is one data point of many data points.
So you would have to at least concede that the level of his eye could be non-contacting that fin or spoiler, because you don't have information as you just described.
Sure, it could be from contacting the ground.
Pardon me?
It could be from contacting the ground. It could be from other things.
But you don't have the information necessary to conclude with any certainty that Mr. O'Keefe at the time of impact had a level of his head in an upright such that it hit that spoiler. You don't have that information, correct?
We don't have that level of certainty. We have that the height and geometry matches.
And you didn't take into consideration the berm, and you didn't mention the berm at all when you were discussing this measurement with a jury yesterday, correct?
That is not correct. You asked me two questions. I absolutely considered the berm. And the second question, when I presented it to the jury, I mentioned the berm when we showed the picture of the shoe in the snow, but that was it.
That's my question. I'll ask it a different way. When we were talking not about finding a shoe in the snow, and you mentioned a berm, I'm talking about when you did the measurement of whether or not the laceration could be caused by the spoiler. You didn't mention accounting for berm height when you discussed that measurement with the jury, did you?
That is correct.
Regarding the front of Mr. O'Keefe's head with respect to whether his head was contacted by that spoiler, did you?
Correct. Again, it was a glancing hit. We wouldn't be able to do that.
Oh, so it's a glancing hit to the front of the head is your hypothesis?
This whole pedestrian impact is a glancing hit.
So you can have your arm to the side like this, with the back of the vehicle coming like this, and you could glance the right eye with the arm out? Is that what you're saying?
That's what my picture shows when I'm standing next to the car. I could probably find the slide for you.
So you didn't do a force analysis to determine how much force would be applying, assuming a contact with the right eye, did you?
That's correct.
And force analysis is what biomechanists do, correct? That's what a biomechanist does?
That is part of what
Part of what they do.
So I lined up his anthropometry relative to the known height of the vehicle.
You attempted to line it up. That's one method, but another method is to apply Newton's second law like you did to the back of the head when he fell, correct?
Correct, if we had more information.
Good afternoon, Dr. Welcher.
Good afternoon, nice to see you again.
Same. I'm going to want to get to what you have depicted in your diagram of holding the arm out. And that's not a glancing impact. Is that, sir, with the right arm in parallel with the back of the Lexus?
Yes, it is. So really I'm sorry, let me finish, please. What you're concerned about is where the center of mass is. With the center of mass out towards the corner of the car, that becomes a glancing contact. So you don't have a center of mass contact, you have a glancing contact.
Okay, fair enough. Well, so let's start the first force calculation.
I need my calculator.
I'm going to let him use his calculator.
Sure.
Okay,
Tell me when you're ready, sir.
go ahead.
So let's take a scenario where it's a center of impact,
Center of mass.
center of mass impact, right?
Okay.
Impact to the right eye.
Okay.
Let's start with that one.
Okay. Question?
What do you get for F of force in the F equals m times a calculation?
About 2,188 pounds. I made a triangular crash pulse assumption.
Right, and if you took the milliseconds in half, become less conservative, would you end up doubling the 2188 number?
If you cut it in half, you would double, yes.
Exactly, through a simple mathematical, semi-algebraic application of the numbers, correct? You divide.
Correct. We're doing a little simplification in terms of the crash
Yeah.
pulse shape, but generally, yes.
Right. So, but let's take the conservative number, the lower number, 2188, that you came up with. Do you know from the literature how much force it would take to break an arm bone?
I have an idea, yes.
What is your idea?
So for a distributed load, such as this, not a concentrated load, you're going to need somewhere between, I've seen, and this is for cadaver tests, a low of like 2,500, maybe a little lower, to a high of 7,000.
Sir, you have switched, haven't you? We're talking about center mass impact. Did you in your calculation just switch to a side swipe impact to do your calculation?
No.
I'm asking about a center of mass impact. How much force would you need? Let's start with the hand. Maybe it's a simpler one. Do you know how much force it takes to break, any of the hand bones, you know what I'm referring to, the phalangeals,
Yes.
the metacarpals, and the carpals?
Correct.
How much pounds of force do you need to break any one of those bones?
Actually, I didn't find any distributed loading on the amount of force. I don't know.
Well, no, I understand, but I'm asking, do you know from the literature, not a calculation? Doesn't the literature tell you? Can't you go to the literature like you did with the head, and you say, okay, to break the occipital bone, the literature says you need a minimum amount of force of this. I'm asking you the same question for the hand. If you don't know, it's okay, but do you know what the literature says for how much force is needed to break a bone in the hand?
So for a distributed load across the hand, there are distributed load tests that show you need over 300 Gs on the arm to do that. So it would depend on the mass of the hand.
What is the range of force that you would need to break a bone in the hand? Do you know from the literature? If you don't, that's okay.
I could probably figure it out.
How long would it take you to figure it out? Do you know from the literature what that number is?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Is 300 to 400 pounds of force sound right from the literature that it would take to break a bone in the hand?
For a distributed load,
Yes.
such as the taillight, no.
No, not a distributed load. A load from a motor vehicle going backwards.
Right, that's a distributed load.
Right. So you're saying 300 to 400 pounds of force would not be enough to break any bone in the hand. Is that your answer?
So for a flat distributed load, like hitting the taillight, you're going to need higher.
How about another part of the back of the vehicle?
I guess if you hit on the very corner and it wasn't a distributed impact, like if you had a more concentrated impact,
Yes.
that could increase or decrease the amount of force required.
How much would it decrease it from the number you gave?
Depends on what you're hitting, what it's made out of,
The
contact
Lexus
area.
SUV. You don't know, you testify to on direct, you don't know exactly where that point of contact is, do you?
Correct.
You don't know.
Except it's on the taillight.
Well, you're saying it's on the tail light, but you didn't observe any impact yourself personally, right?
Did I see Miss Reed's Lexus?
You didn't see the impact, correct?
That is correct.
So, and there is no firsthand witness that saw, under your view, that a collision occurred. There's no witness to say where the arm was, correct?
There's no person that saw it.
Right. And you have chosen a point of contact, okay? You chose that for your analysis, correct?
Correct.
And you picked that location, but it's also possible that under your theory that a collision occurred, that that arm could have been impacted any part of the back of the vehicle. That's possible, isn't it?
That's not probable, no.
I'm asking, is it possible?
Anything is possible. I don't deal in possibilities, I deal in probabilities. It's not probable.
So, but you don't know exactly where the point of impact was, correct?
So within the range of the light and the exact angle of the hand, no, I don't. What I do know is at the rear tail light area.
So your assumption is that it had, that because there's a tail light that is altered, it must have been by Mr. O'Keefe's arm. That's your conclusion, correct?
My conclusion is there are tail light fragments, a broken glass, lacerations to his arm, and his DNA on the back of the vehicle in the area of the tail light.
Sir, and Your Honor, I'm going to move to strike the DNA part of that answer for obvious reasons.
I'm not going to strike it.
Okay, so you're making assumptions. You're taking what you view to be certain data, and you're coming to a conclusion, but that is based upon circumstantial information, correct? Is that fair?
Are you calling like pieces of the tail light at the scene around his body circumstantial information?
Sir, let me go to the force and go back to the force analysis. Let's go back to the numbers. I want to stay on, if we can, just the calculation. So let's go back to the minimum amount of force you understand from the literature that it takes to break any bone in the arm from the finger up. Let's start with a hand. What's the minimum amount of force that can be applied to break a bone in the hand?
So it depends on the loading. So I don't actually know. In terms of the forearm, I can tell you there's data that shows up to 300 Gs of loading, you will not get fractures. There's one up to 750 Gs showing no fractures for a male of similar height and weight of Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's take those numbers,
Okay.
okay? You said 300 and 750. Did I hear it correctly?
You did?
Okay, that's the numbers you gave that would break a bone, correct?
So the 300 actually didn't break any bones, I believe. The 750, the one example, didn't break a bone, but as you got above 350, you started to break bones.
So as
300.
you got above 350,
300.
above 300, yeah, because that's what I thought you said the first time. You got above 300, you start to get breaking bones, correct?
Correct.
And so if you take that 300 number and compare it to the 2,188 pounds of force, you have 7 times the amount of force necessary to break the bone, correct, in the force analysis?
No. If you take 300 Gs times a 12-pound arm, you get 3,600 pounds. The calculation you asked me to run earlier gave you 2,188 pounds.
Right.
So you are 1,412 pounds above the force required. Like the tolerance is 1,412 pounds above the force you would say get in a 20-mile-an-hour impact in terms of the fracture forces.
Let's do it this way.
I'm sorry?
Let's do it this way.
Okay.
The force that you calculated from my hypothetical of this Lexus SUV going backwards, you came up with the F number of 2,188, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't, what was the, you said, you said
2,180.
dyslexic? Or do you say Lexus? I didn't understand what you said.
The Lexus
My apologies.
SUV that you've been talking about.
Gotcha.
Okay?
I didn't hear
You
it.
came up with a number for F for force of 2,188. Are you changing that number?
Nope.
Okay,
Absolutely
so
not.
let's go with your number of force from this vehicle of 2,188. I'm just simply asking, how much force does it take to break a bone in the right arm of a human being? How much force, not acceleration, how much force does it take to break a bone in the right arm?
Sure. So somewhere between 2,500, the one cadaver tested the distributed load of someone of similar size and weight, and actually close in age to Mr. O'Keefe, showed about 7,000 pounds of force to break it.
Let's go to the hand. Do you disagree that the literature shows it only takes 300 to 400 pounds of force to break a bone in the hand? Do you disagree with that?
Your question's too general. I can't answer your question. It depends on the loading. If I take my pencil, which has a very fine point, and jam it through my hand, I can jam it right through my hand because it's a very small point. But if I distribute the load and a broader load, such as hitting a taillight, it takes much more force because the load's distributed across it. It's like if I sit on the corner of my bed. I might sink in this far when I sit on the corner of my bed, but what happens when I spread my load out, when I lay on my bed like this? I don't sink in as far. Has my weight changed? And weight is basically force. No, but I've distributed it over a larger area, so for a given force, you get less sinking into the mattress. So if you hit a broad surface like a taillight or a wall like this, it takes much more force than if I were to take a singular small round object and jam it into the hand. That hurts. This does not.
Okay, if you can hear my question, if it's unclear, you tell me. For not a pen, not your bed, but for a Lexus SUV of 6,000 pounds, is there any part of the back of the Lexus in any manner where you can get a break to the hand from 300 to 400 pounds of force?
Any part on the back of the Lexus?
Yes.
Probably.
Okay. So probably, your words, you can get a break to the hand from just between 300 to 400 pounds of force. That's what you just said, correct?
So you're taking the totality of the back of it, like if you got it stuck in the bumper, potentially, yeah. But from a taillight or a broad flat surface, no.
I'm not asking about a taillight. Any part of the back of an SUV, you agree that it is probable that you can get a break of the hand bones from just 300 to 400 pounds of force?
Your question is incomplete, right? You said any part of the back, but then you wanted me to not include taillights or not include the rear body panel. If you hit a very narrow part of the car, like say the edge of the tailpipe, that creates much more of a narrow contact. So force divided by area is pressure. So if you have a very tiny area, you have very high contact pressures. And so, but if you distribute the load over a larger area, the number on the bottom of that fraction is much bigger, so your contact pressure drops. So hitting the edge of the exhaust pipe is going to have a much higher likelihood of causing a fracture than hitting flat against the taillight.
Did you read the conclusions of Dr. Scorti-Bello in the autopsy?
I believe so.
Are you aware of whether Dr. Scorti-Bello has analyzed whether the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe are inconsistent or consistent with a motor vehicle impact? Are you aware of any analysis to that effect?
Objection.
So I'm going to see you on this one.
I would like to talk now about your paint exercise. You did not present, as you have stated, a force calculation with regard to the arm. You did a paint exercise. I'll just call it the blue paint exercise. Is that descriptive enough for you to know what I'm talking about?
No, it's not an exercise, it's a test.
Okay, you want to call it a blue paint test?
Sure.
Okay, let's call it a blue paint test. I just want to try to expedite things and use parlance that we can agree on.
Okey-doke.
So your blue paint test involved painting the right rear tail light blue, correct?
Correct.
Positioning the test subject behind the tail light, correct?
Correct.
With the arm held out, correct?
Correct.
And at a right angle, correct?
Correct.
And then the vehicle, the Lexus SUV, is backed into the test subject, correct?
So I ran 3 different tests.
I know. Well, let's just do each one at a time, okay?
Okay, so you're starting with the last one.
I'll start with whatever one you want.
Okay.
How about if we start with the one at 1 mile per hour?
None of them are at 1 mile an hour.
2 miles per hour?
2 miles an hour.
Let's do 2 miles per hour. Let's start with that one,
Okay.
okay? Now, did you conduct that test in an attempt to show that the injury patterns on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm are consistent with being struck by the Lexus tail light on that arm?
So generally, I wanted to show that the location, area, and span over which that headlight covers matches the location and area of the lacerations on his arm.
That's what I want to get to. So you discussed data that you say shows the Lexus SUV was traveling above 20 miles per hour during the period that you allege the SUV made contact with Mr. O'Keefe. Is that correct?
No. Where'd you get that from?
Hold on. Okay. The answer is no. So did you do a test involving 20 miles per hour?
I did some other backing tests.
Yes.
I was looking at how the rear pedestrian system and what warnings you got from the rear pre-collision system, the PCS system.
Let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Would you agree that you did a blue paint test with the vehicle going at 2 miles per hour? Did you
Of course.
do that? Okay. You didn't do a blue paint test with the vehicle going at 20 miles per hour, correct?
That is correct. I was not going to hit myself with a Lexus at 20 miles an hour.
You could have done other tests where the vehicle was going at 20 miles per hour if you used a crash test dummy, correct? You could have done that.
if you use the right crash test dummy, and then to set up the test, because generally you only get 1 or 2 shots at it, because you damage the car, you have to know everything about the parameters. And so, again, pedestrian impacts are so very sensitive to initial angles. If I were to do a test and it was off a tiny, tiny bit, and we got some different results, I would be in here having to defend it. Well, your own testing didn't show it. Point is we don't have enough information to be able to conduct that testing. Mm-hmm. No, there is not one single slide I have that says this is the speed he was hit at 24 miles an hour. I do not know the exact speed. We don't know the initial point of contact. We don't know where exactly he was on the road. We don't have enough information to determine that.
Let's talk about the other information you don't have.
Okay.
You don't have the information as to from your alleged point of contact to where Mr. O'Keefe landed. You don't have that information, do you, sir?
I'm sorry, where is my alleged point of contact?
You allege that there was a point of contact between the Lexus, the back of the Lexus, and
Correct.
Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Right, but I don't know where that is on the road.
Yeah. You don't know that. I want to go through the information that you don't have.
Okay, doke.
So you don't have that. You don't have the point of impact. You don't have where in the road there was impact under your allegation.
Those are the same thing.
Right. You don't have where under your view, the body of Mr. O'Keefe landed precisely. You don't have that information, do you?
What do you mean by precisely? We know it's 7 feet off the road. We know it's near the flagpole. We don't know where it started. The problem isn't where it landed. The problem is where it started.
Right. And you don't have that information.
I don't have where it started.
So you believe 87 represents the total rearward distance. Did I hear you correctly?
Correct.
Now, can you please...
Hold on, to be clear. So it starts, it pulls forward, then it backs up, passes where it initially started, and goes 53 feet further back.
That's what I want to get to. How many feet did you say on direct, and did you just say now that it went 87 feet in reverse?
Correct.
Okay.
From its furthest point forward.
Well, that's what I want to get to because I want to have this point clear. How many feet do you believe the Lexus went in reverse based upon your PowerPoint presentation? Not when it went forward and then came backwards. How many feet do you believe that vehicle went in reverse?
Your question doesn't make any sense because when it went forward, then it went in reverse. So it went a total of 80, it went 34 feet forward, then it came back 80, or another 53 feet past where it went.
Exactly. You've testified that the 1162-2 trigger event represents a backwards maneuver, correct?
So again, that was clear. It initially pulls forward and then backs up.
I would like you to define, so it's clear to the jury, do you consider the event of 1162-2 just backward movement, or do you consider the trigger to be forward movement and adding to it backward movement? Which one?
So can we pull the slide up?
Sure.
Could you zoom in? There you go. No, go back to the left.
So you conclude that the vehicle for this trigger went 34 feet forward, is that correct?
Correct.
How do you know the vehicle didn't go 150 feet forward? How do you know it just went 34 feet forward? How do you know that?
So the only data we have is this 10-second window. And so we have the velocity when it's going forward. We know how much time it took to do that. So that tells us how far it would travel. Velocity times time is distance.
So are you saying that it is a certainty that it went forward 34 feet and there's no other number of feet it could have gone forward? You're absolutely certain of the 34 number?
No. Again, if you look, see where it says vehicle speed?
I see it.
So at the start of this event, which is the trigger -5. So the trigger is actually where it's triggered, and it takes 5 seconds before, 5 seconds after. But when the trigger happens, it's actually stopped. But the 5 seconds before, it's going 13.6 miles an hour forward. So at the start of the data, it's still going 13.6 miles an hour forward, but it's slowing down. You can see you have the brake, where it says brake SW, which is short for switch. The brake switch is a 1, which means it's on. So when this event data started, it's going 13 miles an hour.
I'll ask the question a different way. Are you certain that the distance traveled forward during this trigger event was 34 feet? Are you certain?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain during this trigger event.
Pretty certain or certain?
Well, I've checked the math. I've had people check my math. So I try to be as accurate as possible. I would say I'm certain,
Okay.
but I'm an engineer.
Okay.
So there's no absolutes. There's no 100% in my job.
So you're certain of the 34 feet, and is it correct that you're certain of 53 feet going backwards? Are you certain of that, sir?
So backwards from its initial starting position.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And therefore you are certain of a total of 87 feet traveled that you have at the bottom in that yellow-orange. You're certain of that as well?
87 feet of backing, correct.
Okay. Different numbers represent different gear states of the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And a 0 represents neutral?
I think it's either neutral or park, but I'm pretty sure it's neutral.
A 1 represents drive?
Correct.
A 2 represents reverse?
Correct.
Or a 2 can represent slowing down, is that correct?
Not for a gear shift number.
So you didn't say on direct that 2 could represent reverse or slowing down?
God, I hope not. It doesn't. So those numbers simply represent, is the transmission in drive? Is it in neutral? Is it in reverse? It doesn't tell you anything about whether it's slowing down or not.
How many people did you become aware were at 34 Fairview on January 29th, 2022, the early morning hours? How many people approximately did you become aware were present?
It depends on which time, but there could be as many as 16.
As many as 16. And let's talk about the time period from midnight to 1 a.m. Do you have an understanding of how many people could have been present at 34 Fairview at that time period?
So I'm going to see you at sidebar on this, Mr.
Under your theory, the Lexus for event 1162-2 backed up 53 feet. Am I correct?
No, it backed up a total of 87 feet.
Okay, let's take your 87. It backed up a total of 87, okay?
Correct.
And your further theory is that it did so and reached 24 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
And you stated you have an understanding of a certain number of people, and I don't want to talk about the inside of the house, but just that were at 34 Fairview between roughly 12 and 1 a.m. Do you have an understanding of that, sir? Approximately.
I believe I do.
And what is that number?
Do you want them, people that were there for that entire window of time, or just?
Yes, 12 to 1.
Oh,
So Mr. Alessi, just move to the last question.
Right, sure. So, sir, did you assume that there were cars parked out front of 34 Fairview at that 12 to 1 o'clock window? Did you assume any cars parked out front?
the entire time?
No, I'm just talking 12 to, yeah, any time between 12 and 1. Did you make any assumptions whether there were cars parked out front on the roadway at 34 Fairview? Did you make any assumptions with regard to that?
At a point in time, there was a vehicle behind it.
I'm sorry?
There was a vehicle behind it.
Just one?
That is my understanding. In terms of on the street, is
On
your
the
question.
street, exactly. And what, do you remember the type of vehicle?
Yes.
What kind of vehicle was it?
An F-150 pickup.
Did you have any understanding as to whether there was a Jeep vehicle on the road at that 12 to 1 time period?
I had seen testimony somewhere to that effect, but the majority of the testimony was there were no other vehicles.
But you did see testimony that there was also a Jeep-type vehicle on the front, out the front of 34 Fairview between 12 and 1. Is that what you're recalling?
So I'm going to let that answer stand, what he's just testified to. Just go ahead and...
Okay, so isn't there a likelihood, if there is at least one vehicle out in front of 34 Fairview, that there would be a collision of the Lexus SUV with the vehicle out front?
No, the vehicle had left prior to the end or prior to event 1162-2.
What information do you have with regard to how many vehicles are in front of 34 Fairview at between 12 and 1?
So I have Miss Reed's interview statements. I have statements of a number of witnesses. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the names.
Let's not.
I was just going to say, let's not just number of vehicles.
Okay, so I have a number of witness statements at multiple statements from the same witnesses at different times, indicating the path and following the Lexus to the house and then leaving before the event.
Assume that there were vehicles, at least one vehicle, parked out front of 34 Fairview. Is there a likelihood that given 24 miles per hour over 87 feet, is there a likelihood that there would be a collision given the weather conditions as you knew them to be at that time?
Well, the weather I don't think necessarily plays into whether there would be a collision or not, but we know it backed up 87 feet. So again, it goes forward like 35-ish and then back like 60-something. And so if something is within 65 feet of the rear of it, or whatever the numbers are, I would need my slides.
It was 50.
50,
Okay. Yeah, go
57. If something is within that window, then it would hit it.
All right, good. So now let's look at another scenario. If it's going as you describe it, is there a likelihood that the Lexus would also go upon the lawn in front of 34 Fairview?
It depends on where it starts.
You have an opinion, don't you, as to where it starts?
No, I do not. That's actually why I have that diagram showing it off to the side.
That's
I'm
right.
simply showing how far it moved forward, how far it moved back.
Exactly.
We don't know where on the roadway it started.
Exactly. You don't know where on the roadway it started, and therefore all you have is the distance covered, correct?
Correct.
So, but you're saying the distance is 87 feet, correct?
87 feet backwards, yes.
So backwards, 24 miles an hour. Have you ever driven a vehicle backwards 24 miles an hour, sir?
Yes, I think I've driven this Lexus backwards 24 miles an hour.
So if anybody who's driven a vehicle back, have you ever driven any vehicle back 24 miles an hour at 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the morning?
Probably not since I got out of high school.
Have you ever done it when there's a storm that is beginning?
No.
Have you ever done it when there is less than clear visibility?
No and no.
And have you ever done it when there's low lighting?
Oh, maybe when I've been up skiing in the snow, I've done it. But again, that's been decades.
Right. So 87 feet, 24 miles an hour. Are you saying that in every instance that vehicle will stay on the road and for 34 Fairview it wouldn't go up on the lawn?
When you mean every instance, meaning like every possible location on the road it starts from?
Correct.
No, there's some spots, if you start here, it's going to go up on the road, on the yard. If you start too far on the other side, you're going to go over into the neighbor's yard. So it depends on where you start.
It is reasonable to conclude that that vehicle, under your parameters, would have gone up on the lawn. Is that a reasonable conclusion?
No,
So you don't think there's any possibility that could occur, a vehicle going 24 miles an hour at this location, 87 feet backwards, in the dark, with wet pavement at a minimum, and low lighting? You don't believe it's possible for the vehicle to, under your scenario, to have gone up on the lawn? That's not possible.
So your first question was reasonable, and I said no. Now you're asking possible. It, of course, is possible. Whether it's reasonable or not, I'd have to know the starting position.
Right.
If it's very close to the side, then it could be reasonable. If it's further towards the middle of the road because snow is building up on the side of the road, then it's probably not as reasonable. I would need more information to be able to determine whether it's reasonable or not. It's certainly possible. It's possible it could have shot off into space as an engineer, but not probable.
Oh, you think it's possible that it could have been shot off into space, sir?
As an engineer, it's a possibility.
It's a possibility that
Absolutely.
this Lexus could have been shot off into space?
Yeah. Highly, highly unlikely. But
All right.
again, you're asking an engineer about possibilities and probabilities.
Let's get back to reality. So, in terms of the Lexus itself, because you, under your method of analysis, don't have the starting point, you can't rule out that under your scenario, the vehicle would have gone up on the lawn. You can't rule that out, can you, sir?
I cannot. No, it could have.
Okay. Now let's go to the next topic.
The laws of physics are very broad.
You say there's no confirmation bias at all in what you did. Is that your testimony?
That's certainly my goal. I try and eliminate all confirmational bias. I didn't start out at this particular location. This is where the physical evidence led me to. So I would say the conclusions are supported by the science.
My question is, did you engage in any confirmation, and this will be my last question, did
The
you
answer is no.
engage in any confirmation bias in terms of how you approach the issue that you have testified about in written reports?
The answer is still no.
It's a good
All right,
predicament.
so, okay, thank you. All right, so jurors, we're going to send you home because we still have work to do here, and we don't need you waiting there while we do it. So, tomorrow is a half day.